Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give people some time to get logged into the meeting, so we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Zach, this is Marichel, and I'm trying to share my screen, but I cannot share it. It says that it's disabled.
Okay, let me check on that real fast.
Okay.
Okay, I think you should be able to now. Let me know if you still have issues.
You should be able to see it now.
Yep, perfect. So I think maybe in just a minute we can get started. I can give a quick introduction, and then we can transition into the PowerPoint.
Perfect.
So I think we have most people that signed up previously. I'll introduce myself. My name is Zach Powell, and I'm the city's project manager for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. And I just want to thank you all for taking time to join us for this public workshop. Just to let you know that the city's Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan is being funded by the City of Albany and the Capital District Transportation Committee through their 2019 to 2020 Community and Transportation Linkage Planning Program. Marichel Font, who's the other panelist with me tonight, who's from Nelson Nygaard and will be guiding us through the PowerPoint presentation, which will show the format and the broader goals of the draft master plan, as well as discuss the methodology for how the proposed bicycle and pedestrian networks were selected. Since the master plan is a large document, we hope that this workshop will make it easier for you to review the plan and provide comments. If you're only able to join us for part of the workshop or want to listen to the workshop again, the workshop will be available on demand using the workshop registration link, or you can also visit the City of Albany's public meeting YouTube channel page. Since this is a draft plan, there will likely be routes or policies that you would love to see in the plan but didn't make it in this draft, but you don't need to panic. You can submit comments to me up until Sunday, December 15th, and you can submit those via email. And my email is zpowell@albanyny.gov, or you can submit them through the project website using the comment feature at the bottom of the web page. And it's really important that we hear comments from you to ensure that this plan accurately reflects what you want to see in the future of Albany. So now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Marichel.
Thanks, Zach, and good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well? Perfect. Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight. We're excited to be here. As Zach said, I'm with Nelson Nygaard. We are a transportation planning firm. And with me here, there's Drew Van Hengel. She's the principal in charge for this project. And Kevin Lucas, she's an associate in our office, and she's been the project planner and was instrumental to put together this draft final plan. And I also wanted to mention that together with Nelson Nygaard, we've had the support of Creighton Manning and Behan Planning for the existing conditions analysis and the outreach of the plan. Okay, so what's the goal for tonight's meeting and what's the agenda? So as you can see here in the slide, the goal for tonight is to review the draft plan. This is a presentation. We're going to go briefly to all the sections of the document, but as Zach said, the full document is available in our website, and you can submit comments. There's a link there by the draft plan, and you can also go to the bottom of the website where there's another place where you can submit your comments there. The agenda for today's meeting is to review the plan. So we're going to go through the visions and goals through the existing conditions, the bike and pedestrian recommendations, and then we'll go briefly through the maintenance policy and practice recommendations that you will find there. And after I go through all these sections, then we will open for Q&A. You can also type, I don't know if Zach, they can do that, the attendees, but they should be able to type questions on the chat of the call, and then we'll go through them after I finish the presentation. So the visions and goals of the plan, those were agreed with both the City of Albany, CDTC, as well as the advisory committees of the plan. So maybe some of you already know we have a citizen advisory committee group and then a citizen technical advisory committee. And we've met with them since the beginning of this plan. So these goals and that you will see here, this is in agreement with these both advisory committees. So, and if you excuse me for a second, I cannot see my full screen. So if you don't mind, I'll have to, excuse me. So the vision of the plan is that more of Albany is served by walking and bicycling networks that are welcoming, intuitive, and continuous. Walking, biking, and transit are fundamental and viable transportation options that support a sustainable future. Albany's streets feel safe and comfortable for all people who use them, and a culture of awareness and compassion supports all road users as they share the road. The goals of the plan are to elevate walking and bicycling as viable transportation options, incentivize policymakers, law enforcement officials, and roadways designers to take responsibility for including walking and bicycling as part of the transportation system, provide people using the streets in Albany with a shared awareness of and responsibility for street safety, help community members understand and benefit from incorporating walking and bicycling in their daily lives, inform funding programs, and prioritize walking and bicycling to create resiliency in Albany's transportation network. So with this, in the plan, you will see that we did a thorough analysis of the existing networks, both for bicycling and walking. Before we did that, though, we reviewed the existing, so there's a summary of some of the existing plans that relate to walking and bicycling, including Albany 2030 Comprehensive Plan, the Unified Sustainable Development Ordinance, Complete Street Ordinance, the Complete Streets Policy and Design Manual, the Equity Agenda, and the City Vehicle and Traffic Code. We started by mapping the existing network, and we did that because we looked at the 2009 plan. So we wanted to see what was in that plan and what was the existing network. The map that you see here contains trails, so in dark green, but it also contains sharrows, which, as some of you may already know, sharrows are those streets with, in most of the cases, they have horizontal and vertical signing saying that this is a space where the road should be shared by vehicles and bicycles. Bike lanes are those that are painted on the street, and cycle tracks are those that are separated from vehicles. And we added some images. So you can see here to the right what we were referring in this map. So the signs on Manning Boulevard, for example, are an example of sharrows, as well as the image that you have to the right. The middle images contain bike lanes, examples of bike lanes that you have already in the city. And the one to the right is buffered with some stripes, painted stripes. And then the two bottom ones are the ones that are really separated from, you have bicycles and vehicles separated. And these are the cycle tracks and the multi-use trails. The image that you see here to the left is a result of a research that maybe some of you have already seen as well, where it says that less than 1% of people are fearless bicyclists, that we call it. So they're willing to share the space with the vehicles in spaces where the speeds are high and there's a lot of traffic. There's 60%, or we could add these to the 67%, that these are people that are interested. So some of them are more comfortable than others, but the majority of them are interested but concerned. So they will only bike in places where they feel safe, and if possible, if they don't have to share the space with the vehicle. And there's also a 32% of people that will never walk or will never bike. But with this plan, what we were focusing is in this center group, this 60% and potentially this 67%, that they would bike, but if you put the safe infrastructure in place. We also looked, so tied to this classification, we calculated the level of stress, that it's a combination of so I'm going to move to the next slide. So we looked at the level of stress of the existing bike infrastructure, and the level of stress considers the number of lanes, vehicle speeds, presence of on-street parking and bicycle facilities, and available space for bicycling to determine a cyclist's exposure to traffic. And what we see here is that a bit less than 50% is at level of stress 1 or 2, which is good, but there's still more than 50% of this that is under level of stress 3 or 4, which means that most of the people will not bike or are not comfortable biking in more than 50% of the existing infrastructure. We also looked at the existing sidewalk network, and we saw that while the majority of the city is well covered by sidewalks, there's still some gaps that need to be improved, and in particular the western area of the city, which would connect all the institutions with the rest of the more dense area of the city. We also looked, we did an environmental justice analysis, and we calculated, we divided the census tract by high to low sensitivity environmental justice. And we looked at, so the areas that you see in red are those areas that are above the averages of the following indicators that I'm going to list right now. And the ones in green are the ones that are low sensitive, and they are below the average of no internet access, no vehicle access, persons living in poverty, persons with limited English proficiency, minority population, population under the age of 18, and population over the age of 16, and disabled population. So you see here how the city is divided in regards into this indicator, as well as the number that you see here on the screen is the percentage of sidewalk coverage. So we see here that in the previous map, we saw that, yes, there's a lot of sidewalk coverage, but we see here that there's a lot of difference between certain areas of the city. And the reason why we put the equity indicator below is because we wanted to make sure that there's equity in the networks. And you will see as we move forward that this is one of the criteria that we will use to prioritize the recommendations that we have put together. In the next plan, we did the same. So you can see the equity analysis results in the back of the map and the level of stress analysis. And we see that the 2009 Bike Master Plan was aiming for, or the network that was proposed was pretty evenly distributed into these different areas with different environmental justice sensitivity, but the existing network is distributed a bit differently. The good news is that there's more bike infrastructure in the high sensitivity areas in regards to what was planned, but there's also more in the low sensitivity areas. These next maps show again the equity indicator on the back, and what you see here are the corridors and the intersections with high intensity of crashes in the last 5 years. And you can see here that there's high concentration in some of the roads that are wide roads with high traffic volumes. After that, we looked at the gaps and opportunities of the networks, and the map that you see on the screen are the maps that show high stress roadways, which are basically roads with more than 2 lanes and with high traffic volumes, as well as the crossings that require crossing more than 2 lanes. And in this one, we looked at the existing bike network and how the network can be connected to make sure that these key destinations that you see here are tied one to another. So we think that the network, as I said at the beginning, needs to be continuous. So people, if you really want to put together or have a bike network that works, it needs to allow people to go from origins to destinations. For this plan, we use several communication channels to get to all of you and also to collect feedback. The first thing that we did was to put together the website that I hope that all of you have had the chance to look at, and there's all the information of the project there. And there's a section with the Get Involved, where there's a wiki map there where you can put your comments. You can choose which mode you want to put the comment for, and you put an icon there and you can add the comment. And we also put together an online survey. When we finalized the outreach, the participation was very successful. So we had around 500 people entering in the wiki map and leaving comments. And we also had 340 responses in the online survey. In addition to that, we did some virtual meetings. Well, as you know, the idea was to do in-person meetings, but because of COVID-19, we had to move everything to remote. And we did one meeting that was a recording, and it was it explained everything about the project and the goals and where we were at that moment. We did a second meeting, which was for the bicycle user group, And then we did 6 meetings. We divided the city in areas. I'll show you the map now. And then we met with different neighborhoods. And the participations of these 3 meetings was close to 100, although it's a bit difficult to say because some people sign in more than 2 meetings, more than 1 meeting. In addition to that, which we did, the consultants, we led that, and it was during the month of June, CDTC and the city did some additional outreach, and you can see them listed here. That was during, and Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, that was maybe August, September.
Yeah, we started throughout the summer, and then we continued, I think, up until last month with those, and then CDTC did some outreach as well in person at a couple of sites throughout the city as well that aren't on that list.
Perfect. This is the map. So these are the 6 focus neighborhood focus meetings that we did as part of this project, and this is how we divided the areas. In addition to that, we did 2 demonstration projects. So the consultants we designed, we agreed to 2 locations with CDTC and the city. We proposed some designs, and we put them together in September. The first one was Morton Street and Eagle Street intersection, and we, as you can see here in the photos, we designed some curb extensions to shorten the crossings, the crossing distance of the pedestrians, and also to reduce the speeds of vehicles turning in. We did a similar thing in the Melrose Avenue and Breveter Street intersections, where we put some curb extensions there, but we also painted shadow signs along Melrose Avenue to show how a bicycle boulevard could look like. And a bicycle boulevard is a street that it's for slow speeds of vehicles where bicyclists could feel safe biking. And we had the 2 projects, demonstration projects were successful. We received good feedback. Some of the crosswalks have stayed there, and there's in particular this one in Morton Street and Eagle Street intersection. This design of the curb extension might stay when there's a permanent improvement of the intersection. So the next section and what I will be talking about now is are the recommendations, is the exciting part, right? So what do we think should happen now to improve the walking and biking network? For that, we followed the principles that you see here on the screen, which reflect the visions, goals, and objectives of the plan. So the active transportation network should be safe. Sidewalks, walkways, bike facilities, and crossings should be designed and built to be free of hazards and to minimize conflicts with vehicular, traffic, and street design elements. The network should be accessible to all. Sidewalks, walkways, and crosswalks should ensure the mobility of all users by accommodating the needs of people, regardless of age or ability. And the network should connect to places people want to go and should provide continuous direct routes and convenient connections between destinations, including homes, schools, shopping areas, public services, recreational opportunities, and transit. We will start with the bike recommendations. What you see here on the screen are the steps, is a brief description of the steps that we followed to put together the proposed bike network. So first of all, we use the map that I showed you before to see where are the gaps in the network and what should we propose so that these key destinations are connected with the residential areas, for example, and how they connect to the regional trail network. The second step that we looked at to conduct a technical analysis to determine facilities type for each segment. And for that, we use the table that you see to the right, and this is from NACTO. And that's a table that tells you, well, based on the target motor vehicle speed and the average annual daily volumes and the number of lanes, as well as the urban context, what would be the facility type that should be put in place, right? So that the bike facilities, it's designed for all ages and abilities. When we looked at that, we made an initial proposals of the technical of the how the facilities should look like, and then we shared that with CDTC and the city to make sure that what we were proposing was something that was feasible. After that, we did several rounds of a review of the network, and we put together the network that I will show you in the next slide. But first, I wanted to mention that once we got the network, which we'll share with you and hope to receive your feedback, we will prioritize the network we will do a near, mid, and long-term implementation. So this is the proposed network that we've put together, and this map is here for you to review. It's also in the plan that it's available on the website, and we'd like to hear your feedback. So with this network, we've looked at previous plans. We've looked at the feasibility of the facilities. We looked at some proposals of the Bike Coalition, for example. And then we listened to the engineers of the city as well. And you see here that it's color coded in 4 colors. So from, let's say these are organized from facilities that are for these people that are not as confident, right? So Bike Boulevards. So these are all these yellow lines here. Would be streets like the demonstration project that we did, streets with that should be designed for slow speeds where bicyclists could share the space with vehicles in a safe way. The purple ones are would be conventional bike lanes, which are striped lanes, but they would be sharing they would be within the same curb to curb as vehicles. In blue would be protected or buffered bike lanes, and in dark green, the multi-use path or trails. I'll leave it here for a second for you to look at. And as I said at the beginning, you can leave comments in the chat so that we can discuss them at the end of the presentation. As I said before, we're going to be prioritizing the improvements, and this is the criteria that we put together. So we're going to be looking at where the improvements fall. So if they fall in one of these corridors or intersections, where there has been a lot of crashes in the past 5 years, we will be looking at equity. So is the project in an area with high sensitivity or low sensitivity environmental justice? Is the project filling gaps of the existing network? Also, is the project in a place where it will serve a lot of walking and biking demand? And then does it connect to parks? So this is the map that you have. So you've seen the map of crashes, you've seen the map of the equity analysis, as well as the gap closures. And this is the map that we put together to see, to calculate the bicycle and pedestrian demand. And this map is a result of it shows the concentration of population density as well as employment density, and places with high activity generators, such as transit stops, schools, and public services. I'm not showing the map of the priority network, and although you will see a first draft of the map in the report, because the idea is that you tell us your feedback of the proposed network, and then we will update the map of the prioritization plus the table of projects, the list of tables. In addition to this map, we also added some recommended traffic calming measures for bike boulevards and conventional bike lanes in the report, as well as intersection treatments for bicyclists and some branding ideas. And then we continue with the pedestrian recommendations. So for the pedestrian recommendations, we looked at both sidewalks and crossings. So while the bike proposals are more detailed, these are broader recommendations for the entire city. For sidewalks, we look at arterials that didn't have sidewalks on either side. So when that was the case, we proposed sidewalk on one side. And we also looked at the local streets that were longer than 1,000 feet. So to make sure that there were sidewalks also at least on one side. And then we looked at where were gaps. So streets that had sidewalk, but there were some gaps in between intersections. For crossings, we looked at the high collision corridors as identified in the collision analysis. We also looked at the streets that were more difficult to cross, either because there were 2 or more lanes or because the signalized crossings were more than 300 feet apart, and then streets near key destinations. And this is the map of the proposed sidewalk network. So you can see in black, this is the existing network, and anything that it's either orange, purple, or green, these are where we propose to complete the sidewalk network. I want to mention also that this network will be prioritized by the same criteria as you've seen before with the bicycle network. We also did a map of the ease of crossing. So the segments that you see here on green are segments that are good for crossing, but the segments that you see on orange or red are those that are more difficult to cross. And I want to mention that in the final plan, we will be adding a zoom or a more detailed map of the downtown, because here it's a bit difficult to see. Like what we did with the bicycle networks, we also added some improvements that could be considered for crossings, and these include the pedestrian leading faces for left turns, where there's high pedestrian activity. Maybe some hawk signals could be considered, as well as audible signals, and some combined crosswalks for bicycle and pedestrians together. We also, so you will see in the report some recommendations for ADA. And this is an example of the proposed renovation of the Swan Street staircase. And we also provide a toolkit of low-cost improvements that could be done in the walking network. And you can see here this is similar to the curb extension that we did in the demonstration projects, but you could also be thinking of some sidewalk that would be delimited by these sand filled like cylinders. The last section of the plan, and I promise I'll finish in a few minutes, and then we'll allow you to ask questions, are the maintenance policy and practice recommendations. So we start here by some programs, so to encourage walking and biking, so community rides, bike races and other competitions, open streets events, as well as education programs to bring awareness of biking and some training for those that are not that used to biking, safe route to school, and community groups. Some other programs that we included are bike share programs with electric bicycles. So when we did the tour of the city, we were well aware that it's not flat. So electric bicycles could be great to connect the river with the other parts of the city. We also recommend to add bike trip end facilities, such as provide safe, secure bike parking, high quality, that would be the same, bicycle parking in large residential and commercial developments, as well as valet bike parking at special events. We also recommend adding bike repair stations along the routes, as well as wayfinding. We also, in terms of policies, we recommend to establish a towards zero death or vision zero policy. Some design criteria, such as develop context-sensitive design and infrastructure guidelines, which you already have complete street design guidelines, and dedicated findings, so committing to dedicated and sustained infrastructure funds for bicycle and pedestrian projects. In terms of process, we recommend refining maintenance standard design criteria. The network must be well maintained with regular sweeping and short response times for repairs. Establish performance measures to track progress, so clear and easily understandable, related to community values and goals, and reported on an annual basis, as well as collecting counts of people walking and biking to ensure, so to learn what if a project that has been done is really successful, and if not, why people are not using it. And the last part of the report will be, so once we have the final list of projects, both for the bicycle network and the pedestrian network, we will calculate the prioritization scored using the criteria that I showed before, and we will classify the projects in short term, medium term, and long term. And then in addition to that, we will do a high level cost estimation of the project, and we will also add in each of the project, if this project falls into a lower, a dollar sign, which is it's less than 350K, $2. There's an error in the presentation. It should say from 350 to 500K, or if the project is more expensive. And then we also list potential findings, public and private findings that could be used to implement the plan. And that's all in regards to the draft plan. I just added here, as Zach said at the beginning, that you can find the full report on the website, and then you have until December 15th to provide comments, sending an email to Zach or using the email that it's on the website. And Zach, on Carrie, if you want to add anything to that.
Just on my end, if when you're going through the plan, or if it's easier for you to talk through comments, feel free to reach out to me via email, and we can set up time to either discuss the plan over the phone or over Zoom. But I'm happy to do that over the course of the next 2 weeks. So yeah, and I just again want to thank everyone for showing up tonight. We've had a really big crowd, so it's great to see everyone here. And Marichel, we just had a request if we could go back to the slide with the Swan Street connection, the ADA accessible path. Yep. And we'll give Jen a couple of seconds to look at that. And Ed, to your question, there's 62 participants, and I think it's 56 members of the public are attending right now. So someone just asked a question saying, how does this plan take into account other popular non-bicycle forms of transportation, such as skateboards, scooters, and skates? I think the easiest way to answer this question is a lot of the policies that we'll be recommending will benefit not only cyclists, but people that use these other forms of transportation, such as skateboards, scooters, skates. But if you have any specific recommendations, or you think there should be different recommendations specific for those types of forms of transportation, we'd love to hear about that, and feel free to send that as part of your comments for the plan. I'm going to go back to some of the questions that were submitted throughout the meeting. Charles Welch asked if there were any considerations for integrating a health impact assessment into the plan. I'm not immediately familiar with those. Marichelle, I don't know if you're more familiar with those.
No, so we haven't. If the question is if we included like health indicators to we have not done that. If data is available, we could add. We should discuss that with the city, but that could be. We would be happy to include that as a criteria for the prioritization. But as of now, we don't have that. But as I say, we need to refine the prioritization because we need to have the final list of projects. So that's a good moment to go back of what's the available data, if it makes sense, depending on the level that where we can find that. And we could include that. That's a good point.
Cool. So Michael Crowell said that he was surprised that the maximum sidewalk coverage appears to be less than 50%. It seemed low to him.
Well, and I don't know if there's someone from Creighton Manning on the call, so I would like to, I don't know if Tony or Jesse are here, but so this is, I'm sure that it was calculated looking at the total length of having both sides and then dividing by the linear length of the street, right? So there might be a lot of streets with only one sidewalk on one side. So this doesn't mean that you cannot walk there. It means that it's not fully complete.
And we actually just got an update from Carrie Ward, who works from CDTC, in response to Charles's question from Albany County, that we did incorporate health data that we got from the county into the existing conditions portion of the plan.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yep.
Then we will look at to include that in the prioritization section.
Yep. Going back through, Dennis had a question about, and I think this is maybe a good question just to maybe talk a little bit more about bicycle boulevards, but he said that a lot of the map recommended bicycle boulevards, and he wanted to know, how are we defining bicycle boulevards and why are we choosing those over bike lanes?
Well, bicycle boulevards require less space, so that's one thing. The only thing is that they need to be designed so that the speeds are low. That's the key point. And in the report, you will find there's a table with traffic calming measures that should be put in place in those streets where we recommend the bike boulevards. So bicycle lanes, as you know, well, you need to stripe the street, and they should have a minimum of 5 feet, and depending on the volumes of the vehicles or the speeds, you need to leave at least 1 foot buffer between the bike lane and the traffic or the driving vehicles. So that's one of the reasons. And there's a lot of residential streets that could be great, as we have identified them, or even commercial streets as bike boulevards. The only thing, it's really important that the speeds are low so that bicycles can circulate safely.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, bicycle boulevards usually have a lower stress level as well. So it's usually a good option for people who maybe are not as comfortable cycling on roads with higher traffic volumes. So it's a nice introduction for people who want to start cycling more, but are maybe a little bit cautious about that.
Yeah, and with the proposed, thanks, Zach. And with the proposed network, you will see that most of the time there's an alternative. So there's for every bike lane or protected bike lane that we have proposed, there's an alternative route through Bike Boulevards. So if people don't feel comfortable even in a protected bike lane on a busy street, there's the option to, which might be longer, but they still can bike through the Bike Boulevard network.
We had a question from Anne asking, is there a reason that Everett Road is not marked in the LTS analysis? She thinks it could be a really important connector, but right now is very dangerous.
So Zach, I'll need your help here. So Everett Road, does it have existing bike infrastructure?
No, I mean, it doesn't within the city, and it's
okay.
a somewhat small portion that's within the city, but it does provide a connection to the town of Colony.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is servicing traffic to and from Interstate 90. So I think there's some conflicts in terms of the level of traffic that's normally on there. And I totally agree with Anne that it could be a really good connection. And I'd recommend putting that in comments that you submit to our department, because that's something that we'd have to take a look at through a future study in order to figure out how to provide a safe connection for cyclists between the town of Colony and Albany, given that there's a lot of entrances and off ramps to I-90 there. Gail Golderman asked, how will routine maintenance or reporting of problems happen via the C-Click Fix app? So I think maintenance is going to be a really big portion of ensuring that whatever improvements that are made in the city are still making sure that they're still able to serve residents within the city. So I think this is a good opportunity to not only ensure that we're learning about maintenance issues, but also bringing up potentials for new signage in areas or new infrastructure that could improve particular intersections or streets within the city. So I think using the C-Click Fix app is a great way to start passing along those comments. And the way that the C-Click Fix app works is that it particular issues or comments are directed towards the respective departments that can help address those comments. So the more comments the planning department's receiving and other departments are receiving, the better idea we can get of what the city should be looking towards in the short and long-term future for improvements. There was a comment for the sidewalk coverage saying that the report explains that the western part of Albany has almost no sidewalks, and this brings the average down. This is something that we've heard about a lot. A lot of the housing that was constructed in the western part of Albany was done at a time when people didn't necessarily want those sidewalk connections, oftentimes for racist and classist reasons. So I think, this is a good opportunity to reevaluate, in the western part of the city, but throughout, of how to make sure that neighborhoods, are more inclusive and more accessible for all sorts of people. Ed said that he agreed about the comment on Everett Road. In general, there seems to be a lack of attention to those crucial crossings of our limited use highways. These are especially important for bikes and pedestrians, as going around could mean people are being asked to go miles out of the way, not so hard for a car, unreasonable for cyclists and pedestrians. Yeah, and speaking to this, we did want to pay attention to those connections between municipalities because it is really it's really important to make sure that it's as seamless as possible. So, any comments on this, we'd love to see so that we can address that within the next and the final version of the plan. I'm going to move to some of the Q&A questions because I've been pulling from the chat a little bit more. Marshall said, I love seeing the protected bike lanes in the proposal. I felt like there was a lot of resistance to the Madison Avenue bike lanes being one when it was created a few years back. Do the consultants have recommendations about overcoming the resistance?
So one of the things that we also discussed with the city is that any existing bike infrastructure that was not sharrows were staying in the plan. And that's why Madison Avenue is, you see that there, but we also highlighted those segments that are existing.
Yeah, and I would just add, this is, as with the Madison Avenue Road Diet, it's just going to be a lot of conversations between, business owners, residents, cyclists, and pedestrians, with anything that's being proposed to make sure that it's, serving pedestrians and cyclists as well as possible, while also respecting some of the issues that may come up for businesses with deliveries and other issues like that. Deidre Brody said, this is great. Thanks for pulling all this together. I'm wondering if you could speak more to the prioritization of those areas that connect to parks.
Yeah, so for that, you saw that we had a criteria there, and we're looking at the gap, our gap analysis, and what of these segments were directly were feeding to parks. If that's the case, they have a higher score.
Perfect. There was a question asking if the plan's considering installing stop signs instead of traffic lights to slow traffic down in certain areas.
So that was a common, I believe that was discussed in one of our technical advisory committees, and there were, so it's not really, while it seems that where there's a traffic line, some vehicles like speed because they want to pass it in before it turns red, it's not proven that the changing them by stops would improve the intersection. However, I mean, this doesn't mean that in particular areas this couldn't be the solution. So in these cases, what we recommend is, so any of the recommendations that we will put in this plan will require further study. Any bike infrastructure, any intersection improvement, including this change on a traffic signal, would require collecting data of people or looking more in detail what was the cause of the crash, if there were crashes there, looking at the number of vehicles in each turning movement during the peak hour, plus the pedestrians and bicyclists. And then with more detailed information, if this is really the case that vehicles speed more because of the traffic light, then look at is it better to change that. However, it will depend really on the volume of vehicles, but that could be an option. It's just like it would need further study.
So there's a few questions, again on bicycle boulevards. So I'll try and kind of merge these all into one larger question. There's a question on why some of the streets are recommended as bike boulevards, if there's examples within the city, and what design features are used on them just besides low speeds. So I'd say right now we don't have streets that are quote unquote bicycle boulevards, because a lot of what bicycle boulevards are are branding the street to have both cyclists, motorists, and pedestrians know that this is a bicycle boulevard. There are lower speeds on the road. There are design features that are going to be used. So it's really ensuring that people understand the bicycle boulevard. And there are wayfinding features such as distances on signs, connecting people to popular locations or destinations. And Marichel, if you maybe want to speak to some of the design features that are used on bicycle boulevards in addition to lower speeds.
Well, the signing is really important, but I would say that the street shouldn't be really wide. First of all, if it's really wide, you need these traffic calming measures, and there's a full list of traffic calmings that could help divert traffic, slow speeds. It could go from mini roundabouts, traffic diverters, bump outs, etc. So there's a long list, and we put in the report where we would put that. But I think the vertical signing is really important as well. So, well, Drew is on the call. I don't know if she can talk if she's not a panelist. Zach?
Yeah, let me just pull up the participant list and then I can give her the option.
Okay, she wants to add anything.
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. Thank you. Hi, Drew Van Hengel with Nelson Nygaard. Marichel did a great job describing the features that are within the toolkit related to bicycle boulevards. And although a network of bicycle boulevard sounds like a new and exciting thing for Albany, what we're finding around the country is that these are the types of facilities where through diverters, which prevent large volumes of motor vehicle traffic to go down streets, but still allow local access and on-street parking, neighborhoods really celebrate the impacts of slower speeds, lower traffic volumes, and places where young family members or older family members don't have to stick specifically in a 6-foot lane in order to be safe and comfortable around bicycling on the street. So we're really thrilled about the opportunity to connect within the city of Albany with these types of facilities. Thank you.
Okay, I'll switch back to some more of the Q&A questions. There's a question from Lorenz saying, why are there no connections to the surrounding communities in the plan? Some of the examples he brought up were Delaware Avenue and New Scotland Avenue to Bethlehem and Everett Road to the town of Colony. And then also a second question on why is the city not introducing 20 is plenty zones throughout the city as part of an overall transportation plan to benefit all users. I can start a little bit with the first one. We do recommend connections along certain corridors. One of the recommendations is for Western Avenue into the town of Guilderland, as well as Broadway into the village of Menands. So again, we are trying to look to provide as many connections as possible to neighboring municipalities. So if you feel like we've missed some of those, particularly the ones that were mentioned, feel free to send those comments via email to me. We are going to be saving these comments that you've submitted within the chat and the Q&A. So those will be incorporated into the other comments that we receive as well. But feel free to send anything else, or feel free to send it again if you want to emphasize that point as well. We got a question from Tom Benware asking if the plan gets into any more detail regarding education, specifically with bike safety, rules of the road, skill development.
it doesn't go to that detail of the skill development, for example. We can look how we can incorporate that. Yeah, I mean, we will take note of that.
And I can add as well, our department received a few grants to look at and promote pedestrian and cyclist safety into next year. So we're going to be continuing, on this theme into the coming year. So it'll be a great opportunity to make those connections because a lot of, the educational aspects are on a more programmatic end. So it is a lot of building relationships with community leaders and experts who have been doing this for years to make sure that we can keep promoting this and create consistency in the education that's being promoted throughout the city. There was a question from Patricia Glennon saying, will the bike lanes be free of parked cars? I think for protected bike lanes, they would definitely be free of parked cars. For unprotected bike lanes, that's going to be somewhat an issue of enforcement and again, education between for drivers that they need to respect, that the bicycle lanes are an active lane of traffic. This is something that's going to be come down to a lot of enforcement. So hopefully the answer is yes, but that's something I think we can always look forward to improving and working with, other partners to ensure that we're getting the word out and working with other city departments to improve enforcement on that topic. I'm going to move back to the chat. There's a question from JP Shippard saying, are there any commitments from the city to implement the plan? What happens after this is delivered? So towards the end of the plan, Nelson Nygaard has provided some of the potential options, for the city to use in order to seek out funding. A lot of the times we receive funding through the state through a consolidated funding announcement or the CFAs. So a lot of the times, the city as a whole will be looking for what projects make sense for applying for based on the particular funding agency. So there's those options. There's also the option for looking to other private funding organizations in order to achieve some of the projects as well. So a lot of that's going to be on our end as a department, as well as other city departments seeking out that funding. And we have a lot of great people in our department who have been applying for funding and have had a really high success rate of receiving funding. So I have a lot of faith in my coworkers as well as other fellow city employees of being able to find opportunities to actually implement the elements of this plan. We received some more questions about Everett Road, just again, reaffirming that it's not very friendly to pedestrians, particularly at Everett and Central Avenue due to turning cars, and that there's a lot of businesses and places that people visit, which make it an important route. There's a question from Greg Pop saying, does maintenance include snow removal? A lot of separated bike infrastructure becomes unusable in the winter. So yeah, snow removal is going to be, a component of maintenance, because we don't want to be promoting routes that are only usable, a portion of the year. We want to find pieces of infrastructure that can be used for as much of the year as possible. So a lot of that is going to be city departments working together to develop maintenance policies, for these facilities in the wintertime. And this has been coming up a little bit with the recently opened South End Connector, which is a separated bicycle facility as well in some portions of it. So this is going to come down to a lot more discussions between city departments in order to find ways to improve maintenance to make sure that people can use infrastructure throughout the year.
Yeah, and Zach, adding to that, I mean, for the snow reason in particular, a lot of cities with cold winters use the dual cycle tracks even when they're protected, then the width is enough for one of the machines to remove the snow. So that's something that after the corridors are defined and the type of facility, the design can change, and this can be taken into account as well.
Okay, just trying to go through. We've received a lot of comments, and thank you for all doing that. Hopefully answers some other people's questions when they look at this later on, on demand through Zoom or through YouTube. So thank you for this. Dennis, on a similar question for implementation, asked, have you considered laying out specifically recommended funding streams for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that can be acted on? Kind of answer this a little bit. We've identified certain funding sources that have been utilized by the city in the past. Some of this changes year to year too, just based on the goals of certain state departments and divisions on what they're prioritizing based on the plans that they have to create, because they're usually working off of a 5-year plan or a multi-year plan that they have to achieve goals by providing funding for. So some of this changes year to year. There are some consistent funding sources, but in some ways it's good to leave options open so that we're looking at as many possible sources as possible to, hopefully get as much funding as possible to implement the components of the plan. Have some. Ed asked, will a zoomable version of the proposed bike map be available before the end of the comment period? It's very hard to determine some of the routes. And Marichal, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have even separate PDFs of the proposed networks on the website. And if not, we do, as part of the plan, you can download that as a PDF and be able to zoom in to the map that way as well.
Yeah, so we have what's on the website is the full plan, but you have all the maps that you've seen here, plus way more maps of the existing conditions analysis as well.
And then we got a question from Bert Shu asking, what are some of the specific Albany streets recommended as bike boulevards? Marichal, could we go back to the proposed bike network?
Just a second.
Because this might help Ed too, and just giving some time to look at the map, but also for Bert just to.
It's a good idea.
So I know Helderberg is recommended as one. I believe we have 2nd and 3rd Street, within West Hill and Arbor Hill. We have Berkshire Boulevard. So we have quite a number of bicycle boulevards proposed, because again, they provide, you know, a lot of security to cyclists who maybe are not as comfortable with riding now. So it gives more options for people to gain that confidence and be able to ride throughout more of the city. And hopefully give more options to people who potentially want to ride or walk, just providing safer streets in general. Usually at a little bit faster of a pace too, because it's usually easier to implement bicycle boulevards as compared to conventional bicycle lanes or protected or buffered bicycle lanes. Just trying to go through some more of the questions.
There's a comment on Central Avenue, which, well, Central Avenue has, as the comment says, it's a corridor, high crash corridor. And we also learn through the advisory committees all the issues that are there. So one, it's a very wide street. The traffic volumes that are there up to some, I think what you see here in the map could allow for a road diet, which would mean to go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And then gain some space for a protected bike lane. So the reality and what we saw and what we heard from during all this outreach is that there's bicyclists there, there's people walking, but all the intersections are pretty dangerous. So I mentioned the road diet, but curb extensions on the intersections, depending on the type of, you know, how the bike lane would be designed. And looking, as I said, looking at really what happens, collecting data at key intersections, and see what would be the best treatment there.
So we just got a question on, someone had asked a question earlier, and I think we were responding with the last question on the bicycle boulevards of what is new versus what is planned for the future. I think Michael's question was saying a lot of what is proposed currently exists. I'd say kind of going back to the bicycle boulevards, a lot of what is new or being proposed, you know, are bicycle boulevards. And looking to find opportunities, you know, with multi-use paths, bicycle lanes on Washington and Western Avenues and portion of Central Avenue as well. So I think, you know, I think through this plan, there are, you know, a lot of streets that people are familiar with that may have been improved previously, but I think we're looking to try and build from that. And also provide opportunities for people to take alternate routes and make sure that people don't necessarily have to rely on busier streets in order to get around safely, while trying to find routes that are, you know, comparable in terms of time to get there as compared with, you know, maybe some of the larger streets. Dennis just added a comment saying if you were able to get a road diet on Central Avenue, that would be one of the most amazing equity measures in the plan and in the city. The people, people in disadvantaged neighborhoods would have a safer main street to walk and bike on. That would be exciting. We got another question about bicycle boulevards from Marshall. He said, I know you're actively discussing this, but I'm still confused what a bicycle boulevard is. The test project described in the report talks about sharrows and curb extensions. I find sharrows to be mostly ignored and curb extensions to be a real pain as a cyclist. They narrow the road at key points, pushing you closer to cars. Is there more to this? And the answer is yes, Marshall. It's kind of specific to the road or the intersection that the boulevard is on. We kind of like to think of it as a menu of options that we can pick items from in order to implement. So this could be speed bumps, as Marichelle and Drew were mentioning earlier. This could be traffic diverters on longer streets to reduce through traffic. It could be chicanes, which are, creating curves within a road that's currently straight in order to slow down traffic. Again, it's also signage as well to reinforce kind of the culture of what a bicycle boulevard is, which is, respecting that it's a lower speed, lower traffic road that's being shared by multiple users. So there are a lot of different elements, in terms of branding, in terms of signage, in terms of infrastructure within the physical street. So there are a lot of elements to it. Not every bicycle boulevard looks the exact same. So I think, when we get to the point of implementing them, it'll start to become a little bit more clear. But again, kind of going back to it's developing that culture of a more friendly roadway overall and using different pieces of infrastructure and signage to achieve that goal. We got a comment from Michael Curls saying that he was surprised not to see any mention of the bike share program, since he thinks it would add a lot to bike use in the city. Is that because it's not a city service? That's not why. We do have Lindsay Garney, who works for CDPHP Cycle. So they've been a great partner in providing advice throughout the project. And the bike share has been extremely successful throughout the city. So, we're looking to advocate for the bike share program as much as possible. So if there's ways you think we can add to the plan in order to reinforce that, we'd love to get those comments. So feel free to send those along.
Yeah, I mean, the program is mentioned in the report, and what we said is that it would be good to add electric bicycles to that because of the topography. But yeah, I agree. We can highlight that more in the report. That's a good point.
And this is something that CDPHP Cycle has been looking into as well, of expanding the fleet to include pedal assist bikes as well. So I think this is lining up with what they're trying to do as well. I think there's just been a little bit of a delay since the legality of it. They recently became legal within the state. So I think that's delayed things a little bit. Leah said, I think she had a comment about Route 20 being on Madison, not Western. Yuri has a comment saying, how has the pandemic affected how we look at the traffic pattern data, and how will it be calculated once traffic returns to normal?
So that's a very good question, because as part of this plan, we will be collecting some traffic volumes data, or we were supposed to collect that, as well as some bike and pedestrian counts at certain intersections. But the reality is that the traffic patterns have changed. Not only, well, we don't have data in Albany, but they have changed everywhere. What's happening is that the peaks, the typical peaks of a day, normally in the AM and PM, are disappearing, but you have, I would say, the same total daily volumes, but they're distributed differently. So there's more traffic without these peaks, but across the day, right? So people don't go to the office, but they may do some errands in the middle of the morning, and traffic still pretty high in the afternoon. The reality is that in certain places, the transit ridership has decreased, and people either they bike more, so bike has become like an alternative, a real alternative. I'm sure you've read in several newspapers that the bike sales were like had gone over the, like it had never happened before. But some people drive more, and that's the reality as well. So we think that right now, I mean, if we collect traffic data now, might not be representative because of what's happening now. So we're discussing with the city and CDTC we should do that or wait until the COVID-19 hopefully disappears, or it doesn't impact our lives as it's doing now.
And I think there'll be benefits in waiting to see if there's even just new types of patterns or new behaviors that come out of the pandemic when it's ended as well, because it might not be returning to normal, but it might be a new normal. Exactly. That I think we'll have to look at whenever we decide to start implementing portions of the plan. Ian has a comment saying it appears that the plan proposes extending the Hackett multi-use path from Holland to Madison Avenue. Is that correct? And that would be yes. We're proposing a multi-use path that goes along a paper street portion of Lark Street connecting to Madison Avenue. And a portion that would be on road from Madison to, I believe, Morton. Bert has a comment saying for bicycle boulevards along Morris and Myrtle, it'd be great if they were one lane of parking was removed. Tight one-way corridors require watching out for car door movements left and right. So I think some of this could be looked at when, if the city does decide to implement the bike boulevards along Morris and Myrtle for maybe some lane narrowing or some infrastructure options in order to narrow the road so that it could provide more safety for cyclists so they don't have to be as afraid of car doors opening, and other types of obstacles along the street. There's a question from Michael Kroll. He says that he recently moved here from Long Island. One measure that was used there was to identify poor people who use bicycles as their main mode of transportation, and then actually giving them safety equipment such as helmets, vests, etc. Is that something that's been considered? I think as we mentioned a little bit before, the plan does not have as many programmatic elements to it. But I think with the grant projects that we're going to be a part of in the coming year related to pedestrian and cyclist safety, I think that's a really good opportunity for us to look at that. in terms of policies and future partners who could, provide that equipment moving forward. So I think it's a good thing for us to be mindful of, in respect to the plan, but also moving forward with future projects and partnerships that we develop throughout the city. So it's coming up on 8 o'clock right now. And kind of in response to that, Brent just stated that the Albany Bike Rescue has a bike voucher program aimed for low-income and at-risk populations. Anyone who obtains a voucher is entitled to a free bike. So thank you, Brent, for advertising that and sharing that with the group. And he says that the bike comes with a helmet, reflective vest, safety manual, lights, as well as a safety kit.
Zach, I wanted to add before we finish that, because we didn't add a slide of the schedule, but the final plan should be finished by the end of January 2021.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Marichelle. Perfect. Well, it's coming up on 8 o'clock. I just want to say thank you. Oh, yep. Bert has a question just about adding the website. I will put that in the chat again, just for anyone who needs this. Oh, thank you, Yasmin. But I want to just say thank you for everyone who's attended tonight. It's really great to get your feedback on the plan, and I'm excited to see your comments about the draft plan in the upcoming weeks. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you maybe need to provide comments over the phone or through a Zoom call. I'm happy to do that. So thank you, and hope everyone has a good evening.